This piece is for everybody, whether you're in a female body or not, whether you identify as a mother, you have kids or not. This is for everybody, but yeah, enjoy. This is by my friend Ellie Robbins, for the witches, for the priestesses, for all the women who feel at once invisible and unimaginably potent. They say you can't be what you can't see. Well, I'm beginning to be something I don't really see celebrated out there, or at least something I don't see celebrated enough, and something many can't seem to see at all, even when it's right in front of them. So I'm writing this for others like me, the women who are stepping into a strange power, a power they don't really understand themselves and which doesn't seem to originate in them, a power that seems to be flowing through them from some elemental source. I'm writing this now this week because we're entering a challenging season for women like us. If you haven't built the typical life, the holiday season can be difficult. And many of us haven't built the typical life. We don't have the spouse or the house with a garage and the 2 children and the Labrador. Many of us have had to spend the first half of our lives fighting just to become ourselves. We've had to live into and through ancestral inheritances and learn to stand up in bodies and souls that feel alien and alienated in a punitively normative world. We've been outcasts and weirdos. We've struggled with our mental health and with addictions and with bad relationships because we didn't know what we were. We didn't know our value. Nobody was telling us we were needed in all our weirdness, that we were needed for all our weirdness. We talk a lot these days about how invisible mothers are. But do you know who is even more invisible than mothers? Childless women who are caring for everyone around them, who are, yes, mothering everyone around them, and who don't get to call ourselves mothers. Women who are pouring themselves out to care for those around them while also building something other than a family, something most people don't even notice or recognize, who are letting some elemental form of art or love or protest flow through them to create something vital, something that is changing the world, but which nobody's ever going to ask about over Thanksgiving lunch or Christmas dinner. As a single childless woman approaching 40, I've begun to feel like glue, like invisible super glue, forever silently holding communities together, showing up to help people with their lives and their families, and I'm happy to do this. I'm delighted, in fact, like many women in my position, I take great joy in my communities and in being a friend and an auntie. But at the end of the day, when we've lent whatever energy we can to others who need it, the things we are building ourselves all too often remain invisible and unsupported. Because there aren't categories for what we're doing. Because our lives and the ways we're living them make people uncomfortable. Because people look at us and see only what we don't have, and not the wildly rich, expansive, revolutionary connections and worlds and creations we are building outside of the mainstream. But I see it in the goddess women all around me who are right now channeling this strange power, who are struggling with feeling at the same time invisible and unimaginably potent. Yes, I see all you do to support those around you, but I see that you're so much more than that too. I see you metabolizing the world's unfelt pain. I see the way you step in and feel what others aren't prepared to feel. I see that this is a service that is essential in the world's unfolding in this moment, that your willingness to do this is getting us all unstuck. I see you in the silent hours, devoting yourself to art, to activism, to education, to nurturing the living world. I see you bridging the material world and beyond. I see you searching for new, more life-giving ways of living and thinking and feeling. I see you pressing at the edges of what's possible. I see you refusing the smallness that was handed to you. I see you fighting to be allowed to live at your rightful size and pace. I see you seeking. I see you birthing a new world. You are not just glue. You are not invisible. You are your own precious thing. You are a column of pure light, a channel of bright life force. You are change. You are a priestess, and don't forget it. Love, Ellie. And I wanted to open that not just because she opens with the priestess, but because the whole tarot has shown to me that we can topple patriarchal structures, both outside of and within us, when we bring intention and when we remember our value and when we don't buy into the stories, the external stories that seek to discount us. And that a culture that attempts to erase anyone, especially those who are giving care without anything in return, is a dead culture and one that we're leaving behind. And so today's journey through the Major Arcana is going to be a little different than anyone else's because it's my unique perspective. And anytime we're dealing with the tarot, we're dealing with bias and we're dealing with perspective. And we're going to see that through this journey. And by the time we reach the end, we're going to understand how perspective shapes the world and how it creates the edges and the boundaries. So first of all, what is the tarot? I'm curious if anyone wants to take a stab at answering this question. All right, I shall do it. Tarot is an infinite and finite set of symbols. So there's a lot of mythology and lore around the origins of the tarot, and I myself have been on a journey of seeking, wanting to know the answers, believing that there is a destination at which I could arrive if I just did enough research and investigation. Even though when I started, I knew deep down that no, I didn't know when I started. I had to arrive here. I really thought I could get to the bottom of the lore. And what I've been confronted with is a remembering that we just can't know, and that the tarot is not meant to be grasped tightly, but held loosely. And it is a tool to bring us back to ourselves, not a tool that gives us a guidebook. So even though we're going to look at what each card means and what it holds, we remember that the finiteness of the tarot is in its amount. There are 22 major arcana. There are 16 court cards, and there are 40 minor arcana. That's finite. Those numbers aren't going to change. That's what makes the tarot the tarot. The fact that it has a deck of playing cards with an extra court card each suit, and 22 major arcana on top of it. So that is set. Everything else within it is infinite. The symbols are infinite. And so no one guidebook is ever going to be correct. And the only thing, if we piled every single guidebook next to each other, we go, maybe we've just scratched at the beginning, except we haven't, because it's about relationship. It's about our own personal attachment to it. And so that can never be contained, just like the self can never be contained. It's always fluid and it's always shifting. Where did it come from? So as I said, there was a long, many histories surrounding it, but we know literally it did come into existence in the 15th century, in the early 1400s in northern Italy. It emerged in this world of courts. And that's likely why it's filled with Catholic and Christian iconography, because it emerged out of this world that the Catholic Church was overseeing. This was the century that the church began to send colonizers into the West, that really you could look at the beginning of tarot in the modern world as the beginning of the modern world, as this beginning of this progression of thought into the West, colonization and extraction, this paradigm of domination and separation. But many people argue that tarot existed long before that tarot existed in ancient Egypt or perhaps in the Middle East, while others say, no. It was just the 1400s. The playing cards came first. They came from the Middle East, perhaps China, but they were brought into the West, and then the tarot bubbled up out of that. It wasn't ancient Egypt. And people have all sorts of other theories on top of this. But what Rachel Pollack reminds us, and she's a brilliant author to read if you're looking for books on the tarot, She's written 78 Paths to Wisdom and A Walk Through a Forest of Souls. And I'm reading A Walk Through the Forest of Souls right now. And what she reminds us is that if we need proof for where the tarot comes from, we're approaching it wrong. That for us to believe in it, for us to utilize it, to need that proof is missing the point. She says, we often try to explain tarot in the same way we try to explain dreams. We analyze the cards, symbolize them, look them up in a reference book, all to make the tarot rational and safe. We try to pin it down, to give it an origin, Kabbalah, paganism, card games, procession, all to take it out of its dream state and land it safely in history. We don't have to treat tarot this way. In fact, we can use tarot and its dreams, a dream playfulness, to remove the pins that hold down all these other traditions. We say, for instance, the tarot equals Kabbalah, then we can use the strange and ultimately silent pictures of tarot to liberate Kabbalah from that endless list of explanations. Just gonna open my window here. Getting all hot and excited. So, doesn't matter where the tarot came from. What matters is that it exists. And arguably, if it was some sacred inherent truth about the universe, perhaps it is, it doesn't really matter who found it first. The truth would have emerged regardless. This is another quote from Rachel Pollack. Out of the Big Bang, the form and structure of energy must emerge, or creation simply will not survive. Physics identifies 4 forces that hold everything together: the strong and weak forces within the atom, plus electromagnetism and gravity. So we recognize that, one, it's very rare and beautiful what we have. 2, that form and structure must emerge, that emergence is perhaps a truth, and the only truth is that things will emerge and reveal themselves. And then we have a third element here where she name checks physics, identifying 4 forces that hold everything together. So the number 4 is present, and that's something for us to remember. How does the tarot work? Anyone want to take a stab? Well, perhaps by the end, we will know. So of course, well, not of course, we begin with the Fool, actually. The Fool is 0, which means that it could be placed anywhere. But I'm placing it here at the beginning for our ease. And I've attached a quote here that I like by Nietzsche. Man is a rope stretched between the animal and the Superman, a rope over an abyss. Now, what we know about the Fool, and we see the Rider-Waite, the Smith Rider-Waite depiction in the middle bottom here. They're often associated with an abyss. This Fool stands on the precipice of a cliff, and they look like they're just about to take a step forward off. If we look at the top right picture here, with the Fool in the Thoth deck, this character with horns, we see that both of his feet are forward. And so we're seeing this motif of stepping forward and momentum. And we see and then in the middle one, we see this, the feet are totally upside down. So of the 5 depictions where we have someone on the card, we have 3 of them taking steps, 1 of them 2 feet forward, and then 1 of them just completely flipped upside down. Can we see these all okay? I can make them bigger. So we've got some nice amanita there on this Mother Peace depiction. That's a psychedelic mushroom. If you eat too much, it won't be good. But many people say that that suggest that our evolution is partially in thanks to eating psychedelic mushrooms, and that they stimulated our consciousness and allowed us to evolve in a certain way. And so 0 represents nothing. It is the no thing. And so in a sense, in many senses, the Fool is everything, but it is also specific to our animal nature, and this relationship to the abyss, and this tension between our animal nature and our Übermensch nature, or our Superman nature. By the way, when Nietzsche wrote this, it was one of the earliest references to Superman. He wrote it in German, so he referenced the Übermensch, but this was far before the cartoon superhero Superman existed. Right? So the Fool is on the outside, and it's representing the no thing, nothing, source, but also this forward momentum and this relationship to our animal nature, which we see by the dogs on various depictions of the card. That's a loyalty and a tamedness. We've tamed that animal to be loyal to the human. And then we also see these crocodiles, which is a symbol of fear, the tiger, which is also a symbol of fear. So the fear gnawing at the bottom lower chakras, and we see it. We can look at the tarot in relationship to the chakras, the 7 chakras, and we're going to see 7 as a thematic number in here. So something to remember with the Fool is the lower chakras, and considering how they guide us, and considering how we work with them, and how naivete can lead the way, and the pros and cons of that foolish, open nature. Okay. Next, we have the Magician, card 1. Does anyone have any questions so far? All good. Okay.
Wait, I want to say something.
Please.
I'm trying to figure out. I just want to say I had a crazy dream a while ago. It was in 3 parts. The first part, I died, and the second part, I was in the abyss, and I was in a position. I was very happy to be there. Nothing was going on. It was completely dark. It was completely empty. I was unmoored from everything. And when I reflected on the dream later, I realized that the position I was in is the same position that the Fool is in on the Thoth card. I was just kind of on my back instead. So with the legs out and the arms out like that. So yeah, I thought that was cool. This was not pre-tarot, by the way, so I'm not like some kind of visionary or prophet. But I thought that was cool. It was a very cool place to be.
That's so cool. Wow. Thank you for sharing. Did you do a dream spread after that?
I did. It wasn't completely forthcoming for me, but that's okay. I can go back and ponder on it some more.
Perhaps it will be revealed over time.
Yeah.
A friend was telling me the other day, we were talking about dreams and dream analysis, and I've worked a little bit with a dream coach who studied Jungian dream analysis, and she's so firm that everyone in the dream is you, that everyone's a reflection of you. And I really took that to heart. But my friend was telling me the story where she had this prophetic dream. Like, she had a dream where her friend came to her and confessed that he had cancer. And she was shocked in the dream. So the next morning she reached out, and he was like, how did you know? So it's very interesting when we're using self-analysis, when we're using tools like the tarot or dreams to reflect on ourselves, and we're given these rules, sort of. Yeah, Carl Jung says, oh, it's just you in the dream. Or I don't know what Carl Jung said, but the woman who studied him, who I worked with, said that. So I took her word on it. And we do that when we get advice from people, when we have our cards read, when we read our horoscope, we buy into the bit. And that's okay. we're human, we're following our impulses, we're learning all of that, but ultimately something that we can incorporate is the knowing that it's infinite out there, the trust that it's infinite, and remembering that everything comes with bias, and that when people are giving us information, even if they're using our energy to give us information, it doesn't mean that it's correct. They may be picking up on something that we're experiencing or thinking or feeling and reflecting it back to us, but it's coming through their bias, it's coming through their channel, and it could get distorted. And what the magician represents is this alignment of will and using our energy to create. And as we see the magician here surrounded by tools, he has the 4 suits or the 4 elements, right? The 4 suits are the 4 elements. And remember, the number 4 is important. Physics tells us there are 4 known things. And a lot of occult teachings will tell us that the universe is mental. This is a quote from the Kabbalion, which is a Hermetic text. And it has rules. It lays out rules for the universe, principles. And the first one is that the universe is mental, that it's entirely a concept in our minds. And it is. There is a world, a universe that is entirely mental. And if there's realities outside of that, I don't know. But what I do know is that to use the tarot to our highest abilities, we want to keep developing our toolbox, and we want to keep adding new pieces in and continuing to remember that bias is everywhere, and it's our job to come back to ourselves, to what is an alignment for us, to our relationship with our toolkit and our inner knowing and our infinity, and go from that place. Not what other people are telling us we should do, not what other people are selling us, but our own internal knowing and directing our will forward. And this perhaps could be extended, not just other people telling us what to do, but sometimes even our own body chemistry kind of working with us. Like, you know, when you think you're angry, but you're just hungry, or, you know, you think you love someone, but you had intimate relationships with them and your body is flooded with dopamine, and perhaps they're not the same thing. There are all sorts of different layers that we can bring to our internal understanding and our relationship between our mind, our body, and our soul. The second card, or the third, but card 2, is the High Priestess. And this card, you can see the word heresy down at the bottom. When it came out, this depiction of the female pope was quite tongue-in-cheek. And we know that these cards emerged through in this place where the pope was the guy who ruled the land, and there weren't females in the church. They weren't leading the church, and so this image was quite subversive for the time and quite heretical. And it's changed over time. You can see the bottom right depiction here is from the Marseille deck. This is one of the older decks. This one came out of France in, I believe, the 18th century, the 1700s. But you can see in the more modern decks, as you know, it evolved into the priestess. It went from the papess to the priestess. And the question I have here for us is, what is your relationship to yourself? And this is a quote from Joseph Campbell. Heaven and hell are within us, and all the gods are within us. All the gods, all the heavens, all the worlds are within us. Rumi said, you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the ocean and a drop. And the 2 represents the first act of awareness. It is when one sees itself in the mirror. And this is a place where we develop trust, develop power, and remember ourselves. outside of the constructs that have been handed to us. I've always loved this image of the priestess from the Thoth deck, and I started using the Thoth deck back in 2019 when I was spending time in this yoga cult, for lack of a better word. And cult is a strong word, but they were teaching Kundalini yoga, which is a specific kind of yoga that came out of the East by a man named Yogi Bhajan, who was a Sikh who used Sikh teachings and yogic asanas and kriyas and kind of blended them and created his own thing that was very much about these deep esoteric experiences. What the yoga does for you is gets you high off your breath. You're stimulating your nervous system and your glandular system to give you these experiences. And they would always talk about vibrating the cosmos. They would like, we're going to shift the matrix. And, you would do these like crazy things where you'd have, your hands in the air and you'd be like breathing really hard for like 30 minutes and you'd be like dying. And they're like, no, but you're going to shift the matrix. It was a wild experience and very, very upsetting in a lot of ways, because even though the technology it can be a wonderful thing, we're always manipulating our bodies, whether it's drinking coffee, going to bed late, like everything we do is in relationship with our body. And it's going to change our nervous system, or it's going to change our glandular system, or it's going to change the chemicals. But there are really intentional ways we can be in relationship to our bodies. And I think it starts with a true knowing of the self. And when I say a true knowing of the self, I mean a state of grace and openness and curiosity and subversion. And I love this depiction of the priestess from the Voyager deck here. It's so earthy and like Earth Mama. There's a dolphin on there. Ooh, there's a dolphin on there. And there's an owl. There's our owl. Yes. Deep, deep, dark wisdom. The dolphin is so cool to see on there. I was at the Hagia Sophia in Istanbul last year, and it's a mosque that used to be a Christian church. It was conquered in the 1500s, actually right around when the tarot was emerging, and they turned it into a mosque. But there's these stone engravings of dolphins on the inside. And there's actually mythologies in cultures all over the world of like these fish people teaching ancient cultures. I think the Dogons still have like, that's one you could look up and learn about. Like, they're like, these fish people came down and they like gave us all this information. But really, and maybe it's true, I'm on board. I'm here for it. Or it could be a great metaphor for life emerging out of the ocean. That's where we came from, and the ocean, and of course the cups, feelings being directly related with the divine feminine and the womb space. Yeah, dolphins. Cool. Okay, so card 3 is the Empress. And when I think of 3, I think of Saturn on the Tree of Life, and we're not going to get much into the Tree of Life in this presentation, but it is something that can be fun to study if you're interested in the tarot, looking at the Kabbalah Tree of Life and how it outlines the journey of consciousness into matter. And the reason why I bring it up is because Saturn represents the womb. And we can see this very clearly with the Empress being a very, very motherly energy. Some depictions have her pregnant. I don't know if she's pregnant in any of these, maybe. But it is this womb energy that everything emanates out from. The 3 being, the building block of consciousness. So 3, like the Holy Trinity, right? one comes into existence, it recognizes itself, and then it recognizes that it's separate from the other. And that's the three, and that's that building block where everything comes from that place. Everything resonates out from the three. And I put this quote here from Marianne Williamson, who, I don't know if she wrote A Course in Miracles, but she taught it. She's currently running for president of the United States. And so our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us most. And I put this in here to draw to conclusion these first three cards with what's in your toolbox, what is your relationship to self, and life is a living ritual. Because everything we do is a form of witchcraft, whether it's intentional or not. Every word we say has a certain resonance. Every word we say has definitions attached to it. Jillian, did you have something to add there? I saw you talking, but you're...
I'm just curious about something about the word every. I was like, when we say like always or never or things like that, and how we're often getting trapped in like the binary by making things. And I was like, I wonder if it is every.
That's such a good reframe. I could just say words have resonance.
But yeah, that's what I was like, I wonder if it is every, or if we're getting stuck in something, was my curiosity.
Yeah, because it's besides the point. It's like, well, that word, and it's just like, well, no, like things happen.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah. So everything exists in relationship. I said everything again. Does everything exist in relationship? I want to stick with that one, but I'm gonna say my job right now, I'm working with an entrepreneur and coaching her to share on social media. And I was like, stop saying but. And then she was like, and I'm like, right. Then all you think of is but, like when you tell someone not to say it. But yeah, life is a living ritual. We are affecting the world around us. We are affecting the people around us, whether we realize it or not. And our belief systems are shaping the ways we act, whether we realize it or not. There are more layers than we will ever comprehend at play in shaping our behavior and our beliefs. And I don't know that we will ever get to the bottom of it. However, I do think there's more invitations for intentionality and more understanding, not from a place of fear, how our actions resonate, because there's no need for fear in that. As long as not as long, it just is what it is. But the intentionality that we can bring to treating life as a living ritual, to treating everything in our space as something that we're in relationship to, something that is affecting us. The pictures on my wall write little stories on my brain when I see them. And that's the same for the trees, and that's the same for the way my roommate looks at me. It's all of these different little granular things that make up who we are and how we show up in the world and what we put out into the world. And now we've reached the 4. 4 is the Emperor. And I'm going to read this quote. Well, first, this is from a tarot text. All that exists, whether good or evil, light or darkness, exists and is revealed by the Tetrad. So there are 4 seasons. There are 4 suits in the playing cards. There are 4 letters in the name for God in the Jewish tradition. There are 4 directions. And as such, it could be argued that we live in a 4-fold world. But I put this quote, I'm going to read this quote from Audre Lorde. This is from an essay called The Uses of the Erotic. We have been raised to fear the yes within ourselves, our deepest cravings. The fear of our desires keeps them suspect and indiscriminately powerful. The fear that we cannot grow beyond whatever distortions we may find within ourselves keeps us docile and loyal and obedient. Externally defined and leads us to accept many facets of our oppression as women. When we live outside ourselves, and by that I mean on external directives only rather than from our internal knowledge and needs, when we live away from those erotic guides from within ourselves, then our lives are limited by external and alien forms. We conform to the needs of a structure that is not based on human need, let alone in individuals. So this is an invitation to feel your way beyond the four, that what is emerging from your body, your desire, your excitement, when she talks about the erotic, that's life force energy. That's our connectivity, that's our creativity. What is emerging through us, what wants to be expressed, may not fit into the four. It may not fit into the structure. It may not fit into the tradition. And that's okay. We are in a time of crumbling and rebuilding, and we are in a time of releasing empire. And so empire will continue to show us its fourness, but we don't have to participate. And this is not to say that this is a negative card. In the Mother Peace deck, the write-up is quite negative. For this one, this is a very feminist deck, or claims to be a feminist deck. Whether it is or not isn't up to me to decide. They're quite disparaging of the emperor, and I don't think that that's useful or necessary. But I do think, and the four isn't inherently problematic in terms of being a structure, but there are, curiosities there for us to sit with, what the four means, and if we can, move beyond it. So what comes beyond it in the majors is the 5. And this card is called the Pope, or in more modern decks, the Hierophant. There's probably different names for it too. I'm curious, Tessa, if it's called the Hierophant in your deck. Yeah, is it got a nice owl on it?
No, it's got amazing rats on it.
Can you hold it up more? Whoa, whoa. Cool. Oh, wow. Does anyone else have a deck with a different depiction on it? Also, I'm curious what the rats symbolize.
Especially because this rat is like given this is very papal. This is Pope Rat talking to his, I was gonna say his harem. No, not the word.
Wow. He's got a key behind them. Yeah.
It's a good time.
So a lot of the depictions have keys, which is interesting. This guy has a key. They have keys. So we know the 4 was the structure. We know that the 1 was the will, then 2 was the reflection, and then 3 is the womb. So once we hit 5, we reach the human. It's this embodied wisdom. And this is Taurus's card, and Taurus is fixed earth. And you can apply that lens to all the majors if you look up their astrological ascriptions, which we're actually going to get to in a minute here. The importance of the astrology, or the shiftiness of the astrology, perhaps. But something that I found really interesting for this card, it's been coming up for me lately, and I've been asking myself what it means. And for me, I've been working with a lot of trust and listening to the body and being in the body. But one of my favorite pieces of literature is a book called The Chronology of Water by Lydia Yuknovich. And in that book, she says, the body doesn't lie, but when we bring language to the body, isn't it already an act of fiction? And that reminds us that language is a separation, that the act of language actually takes us away and puts us somewhere else. And it is part of the paradigm that keeps us in this so-called matrix, perhaps. It has been tracked throughout history that every time alphabet literacy rises in a culture, images of the goddess lower. And so we actually saw in the 1400s, again, when tarot emerged, was also when the printing press was first became widespread. And that happened in 1450, and that led to the proliferation of the Bible. This is the first time that the Bible has actually been able to be spread far and wide because of the printing press. And what happened in that time, they began a genocide against women. They began killing women for being witches, so-called, or for knowing, for being in charge of their reproductive cycles. And that wasn't the only time. It's actually tracked all throughout history that every time an alphabet literacy language rises, we stop, because the goddess is the image. And when the alphabet rises, the god, the patriarch, rises. And so it goes up and down. And I really think and hope that we're in a time where these two are merging. There's a great book called The Alphabet versus the Goddess by Leonard Shlain. If anyone's interested in learning more, I highly recommend. But the reason why I said this one, what is a gospel, is because on this Thoth depiction, we see these 4 fixed signs of the zodiac, Scorpio, Aquarius, Leo, and Taurus. And we see this iconography throughout the tarot. We also see it often on the wheel card and often on the world card. And those are named after the 4 gospels from the New Testament. And except they weren't written when, they were written after. And so I wanted to bring awareness with this card to the body and language and fiction and truth and what we know, or what we think we know, and knowledge being an accumulation of power and wisdom that fulfills us, but always coming back to or being in relationship to the wisdom from within and the wisdom from without.
I have a question.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel like is, so aside from like the kind of couple steps of the fixed signs being in reference to the 4 gospels, what else can we draw from the fact that this knowing by the body is related to the fixed signs? Because like Taurus, that makes sense. Fixed, embodied, loves sensual, nice things. But what about the other fixed signs? Like how does that inform the Hierophant?
That's a great question. Let me think while I also pull up a text. That inform. So I'm just going to read here from Understanding Aleister Crowley's Thoth Tarot. The 4 cherubic beasts represent the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac. Tarot decks reaching back to the earliest packs have traditionally displayed the cherubic beasts in the corners of the various trumps. It's almost universally consistent, including the placements.
I don't, if I can jump in, I remember feeling like it was something that was a tradition more than something that was literally that you could connect from the Hierophant to each sign or each creature. Because I read the Lon Melody Cat book also, and excuse me, it kind of felt like every time you depict certain things in tarot, you have to show these 4 beasts, and it's not just the Hierophant, they show up on other cards as well. And so I'm wondering if there's not as strong a connection necessarily between the 4 fixed signs and the Hierophant, as there are between another maybe symbol or archetype. But that's just my hazy recall. I don't know if that helps, Dana. Sorry. Hi, Dana.
Hi. Interesting. Thanks, guys.
Yeah. I'll offer something. When we think about astrology and how it has informed our thought over the years, and we think about 50,000 years ago, before we had televisions and radios and pens and paper, we were out watching the stars. We were lying down, we were in relationship with nature, and at night, I think we probably saw the stars a lot more than we do now, and they were probably a form of storytelling to us, and we began to recognize and identify shapes in the sky, and they began to inform us and write our stories, and we wrote their stories, and it became this entanglement, where they shaped us and we shaped the world by the stories we told about them. And so perhaps with the fixed signs, like it's called the Grand Cross in astrology, perhaps that is, like, if we think about that symbology, like with the it appears on one of these cards, I think it's the world. Yeah, there it is. That there's the Grand Cross there again, right? And then we see the 4 again. So this sort of like static blueprint for the human, or like this is sort of like you place it onto that thing, or we place our stories onto this cross. And so the human, the knowledge, the ability for knowledge to be with knowledge, like exists in the context of these stories that shaped us, and we shaped them from time immemorial, before we were in the mind. That's what time immemorial means. You often hear it in the land acknowledgements. When we acknowledge the First Nations whose land we stole, we say that they've guided it since time immemorial, and the definition of that word is time out of mind. So before we were operating in the construct that we operate in now, in the fourfold, in the baked in sort of linearity narrative that we're in. Yeah.
Kelly, are they always in the corners?
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
I wonder, like, because I mean, the fixed signs, the 3 groups for signs are cardinal, so things coming into form, fixed, life, being in form, and mutable, so the dissolving of form. And I wonder if it's like the center of the cross is like you existing while in form.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I love that.
My mind was just going that way too. Like the Grand Cross is like how we pin our incarnation in this world. Like we are in this planet, in this like collection of stars. And so like a really strong like symbol for the things that exist when we are in form. I totally resonate
Yes,
with that.
and the the symbology on the Hierophant card does have something to do with pinning the 5 to the 6, because there's pentagrams. And again, I read this stuff months ago, but when you said pin, that's exactly what's happening on this card. Kelly, do you know what I'm talking about? Can you talk about that, or can you read from the chapter?
Yes, I sure can. I had this slotted for card 11, but we'll read now.
Okay.
This is perfect. Yeah, so discovering that the rose of our human 5-ness is wedded to the cross of the deity's 6-ness is the first goal of every spiritual seeker. Not every spiritual seeker, certainly some spiritual seekers in this tradition. The next and last goal is for us to identify and completely with our secret self and come to the full realization that we are neither truly a 5 nor a 6, but a great, big, beautiful 11. So in our body we are a 5, but in our like we are the 6 also, because God is the 6. But we're the 5 and the 6 together. We're the 11. Does that make sense? We're the 11.
It feels great to say.
Awesome. So yes, this is the 6, and I think this has got to be like the most confused card in the majors, perhaps the whole tarot deck. Especially like after we've just realized that the 6 represents God. And we're like, wait, what is happening here? And I think it's so interesting that this is the oldest, the bottom right, the Marseille depiction. And you can just see how drastically it changed when A.E. Waite did this deck. And like this one too is based on older esoteric teachings, but we see the seal up in the corner, right? The seal of Solomon, which today represents Judaism, but it's only in recent history that the hexagram has been associated with Judaism. Before it was the seal of Solomon. And as we know, is also the elements are represented by the triangles, the 4 elements. So that together could also represent all 4 elements. The power of choice. Only through passion can we sense from deep inside, rather than through intellectual argument, the spirit that fills all existence. It's about meeting our ego on the path. I mean, it's about many things. I opened this workshop saying that we weren't gonna say anything's one thing or the other, but there's something really freeing in recognizing the power of choice in relationship and meeting our ego and our reflection on the path. It's said that everyone is a mirror for us. Everyone is an opportunity for growth. But when this card comes up, it can be easily construed. You know, we look at these depictions here and we think, oh, it means a relationship is coming. But when we see these older depictions, we see this pathway here. And this one's an interesting one with the vice and virtue on the 2 paths, which comes up in association with Venus. Venus is associated with the 7, but also the 6. I think it's associated with probably all of the numbers, but it has a special association with the 6 and with desire and with this relationship between vice and virtue and following our making choices or making the illusion of choice, whatever you believe in, but meeting someone on the path and deciding which way am I going to go and where am I being led from and what am I allowing to synthesize. Because when we get to the 7 is the end of the first stage of the alchemical process. It's the 7 ancient planets, the 7 chakras. There's a sense of completion with the 7. And so the 6 is an integration piece before we reach the 7, which isn't total actualization. As you know, we go up to 21 in the majors, but it is a type of actualization. It is a type of clicking in to a new type of awareness within our consciousness. And I call this one the point of no return, because something gets locked in at this point. And when we read the majors, we can go 1 through 7, 8 through 14, and 15 through 21. If we want to look at them that way, we can look at them as 3 different rounds of this actualization process, or these thematic journeys. They can be broken up differently as well, but that's one way to line them up and study them. And the Chariot is such a wonderfully depicted card because it depicts this carriage, but there's no reins, and there's no wheel either. There's no relationship to control here. It's you're in the carriage being pulled by often these sphinx type creatures. And again, we see the 4 fixed signs on the zodiac here. So they're not always in the corner, actually. They're usually in the corner, but we see them here on the Sphinx with these different faces and shapes all laid out, all switched up. It's like so interesting to think about what you were saying, Dana. I love that offering of like it pins us in time, because it's like only from Earth would the sky look this way and be set up like that. So it's cool to think about that, what you just said, with the context of this card, where it's like things are mixed up, like we're shaking it up. Like, but I love this depiction of the Chariot, because it shows us, like, remember we started with the Fool and we were talking about the lower chakras, right? And our animal nature and our impulses of where we're being driven from. And this charioteer is baked into this gray block. So it suggests that like whatever's happening in the lower chakras, it's like baked in, and the gray represents non-duality. So it represents the synthesis of like this ability of maybe we found some control over our animal nature. We've integrated something, right? We saw in the last one, this is a card. This depiction really shows us integration. I think this depiction shows us integration too, right? And so we're integrating something, and now it's locked in, it's baked in. And this is like the Shiva Lingam, Yoni. I'm not saying it right, but in the Eastern the yogic lineages, this is a representation for the male and the female coming together, like the synthesis. Yeah, so we've integrated, we've made this balance, but we're still not, like, we don't have full control. There's no reins, there's no wheel. We're just in the chariot and we're moving forward, and we have a new relationship to our higher self. We're surrounded by, we're head in the stars, we're crowned. And we're going to touch on this later, but I feel like this speaks really clearly to what Dana was saying about our position, and like this, how the body, our relationship in our bodies to the sky. And you see the Cancer there, right? And Cancer, they say, is the gate that consciousness entered the universe through. So that's something to stick in your back pocket and marinate on. And I wrote here a quote from Living Untethered by Michael Singer. Your entire life is composed of consciously experiencing 3 objects of consciousness: the outer world, the thoughts, and the emotions. And I think the Chariot is when we've developed a different relationship to the outer world, the thoughts and the emotions, or it's an invitation to consider that from our throne and from everything that we've earned so far, or everything that we've illuminated for ourselves so far. This is also a point of no return, because things get shifty. Things are about to get real shifty with the 8, because the 8 and the 11 are the only cards in the tarot that are switched up. Everything else in the tarot, all modern tarot decks, is set, except for the 8 and the 11. So as you can see with my 6 decks, only one of them depicts 8 as strength. But I do think a lot of modern decks depict strength as 8, because a lot of modern decks are based on the Smith Rider-Waite deck. Until A.U. Waite changed it, it was Justice. It was Justice as long as we can track it back. Mind you, even though we know the tarot arose in the 1400s, we don't know for sure if the Major Arcana is complete or if the order changed along the way. But we do know that it was Justice, and then Waite changed it to Strength to correlate properly with the zodiac. So we had Aries, Taurus, Gemini, Cancer, and as we all know, Leo comes next. So what's Justice doing there? What's Libra doing there? And that's why A.E. Waite switched it to correlate with the astrology. Aleister Crowley switched it back in his deck. Other people switched it back more. Older decks have that, but most modern decks that are based on, well, any deck that's based on the AE weight deck, which again is like, if you're in an Urban Outfitters and the Britney Spears deck is there, it's based on this deck. And also lots of like lovely decks too, not just capitalist ones, but whatever. I don't have a good answer for you about why they were lined up that way originally, and why it got switched. I've tried to look into it at a bit. This book that Sherry and I both have read discusses it a bit. If you're curious, I encourage you to investigate it further, and please let me know what you discover. It's one of those beautiful ciphers. So, oh yeah, as we were saying in the last one, Cancer is the gate of consciousness. So Libra is the equilibrium point in the zodiac as we now understand it. But apparently it according to the secret tradition was inserted at the time when the division of the sexes took place. The old zodiac had but 10 signs, making Capricorn lord of the 8th sign. It is known that Capricorn and Cancer were the ancient gates of birth and death. So some really interesting little tidbits there. Lots more to dig into, lots of curiosities to follow, the trajectory of the zodiac changing, the concept of the division of the sexes being introduced into society. I would have to do a lot more research here, and we have a lot more cards to cover, so I'm going to keep going. But it's an invitation here to recognize that there is more than one kind of infinity. And what that means is all possible outcomes and all outcomes. And so, as we know, with the 1 through the 7, we're set. And then we go into this 8 to 11 vortex where the 8 and the 11 are switched around. And this invitation to infinity, the definition of 2 kinds of infinity. Yeah, as I mentioned, all possible outcomes and all outcomes. When Stephen Hawking was doing his final paper and talking about the concept of the multiverse, he deduced that all possible universes would have to have the same laws of physics. And so that would be all possible outcomes. All outcomes, the next level of infinity would be a multiverse with universes with different laws of physics. So those are 2 different levels of infinity there, and invites in this invitation to be fluid and to allow for the swirliness. And something that's super interesting, we're in a 7 year right now. We're in a Chariot year. So what's coming next year when we step into this? Strength, justice, a little bit of both. We're going to find out. So key 9 is a type of completion, because once we reach key 10, we're back to the beginning again, even though we still have 11 more to go with the majors. So I'm not going to say too much about this card, which I hope speaks to the Hermit itself, in that it's about knowing what to share and what to hold back. And we don't see it, we only see it in one depiction of the Hermit here, but his lantern is mostly covered here, choosing when to speak and when to hide away. And you can see in the ones that carry lanterns here, there's something in this lantern. And what we see here is a star. We can't see what's in here. It appears to be a star. There's nothing there. And this one kind of looks like the sun. And that's interesting. So we're going to leave that question hanging. And we're going to complete this first round. Even though we completed at the 7, we're completing again at the 9. We're also closing around here and moving on to the 10. So this is the wheel, as you know. And again, we're seeing the repetition, some repetition of the symbology. There's the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac there again. And then on the other depictions, we're seeing different types of creatures, a sphinx, kind of a crocodile, some kind of very odd looking creatures moving around this wheel here. And then in the collage piece, quite a lot of gold and gildedness. Fortune, or the Wheel of Fortune. So I decided to name check our friend Elon here because he decided to change Twitter to X. And I thought that was really interesting to place that symbol onto that platform. And I think that there is a sort of chaos present with the wheel. The wheel is ultimately these cycles of life. It could be seen as the wheel of karma. And what perpetuates the inevitability of life, but also the opportunities to get stuck, evolution, devolution, and Elon Musk shares something in common with me. We're both fans of Romeo and Juliet. And one of my favorite lines from Romeo and Juliet, which makes me sure that Shakespeare was using the tarot or tapped in to that some sort of knowledge, was that after Romeo kills Tybalt, he doesn't want to kill Tybalt, like Juliet's cousin, like he doesn't want to kill her, but they get into a scuffle and Tybalt's being just awful and he like kills him. He has no choice. And he knows that there's going to be huge consequences and that like it's going to be hard for him to be with his girl. And he falls to his knees and he screams to the sky, "I am Fortune's fool." And I love this line. We think Fortune's fool, right? Fool being, as we know, this naive character, someone who's driven by their impulses, their lower chakras, their desires. And then fortune being this wheel of life, fortune being the concepts of karma and desire, actions and impulses and ideas beyond our control. And so I think Elon is a little bit like Romeo and a little bit like me, where we get carried away by our impulses and we really, 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 really want that validation outside of us. And it kind of makes the wheel spin a little rocky sometimes when we're reaching outside, you know. And I say this because he's been quoted in articles saying like, "I can't live without a person. I'm looking for my soulmate, da 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 da." And it's quite a popular mythology in our culture. Many of us have been chasing that. But it certainly makes me wonder about the ripples of our actions when we're seeking from an ungrounded place, when we're buying into the inevitability of chaos, when we're not seeking to right ourselves, to find our internal equilibrium from which our life force energy spreads outwards. Here we have another closure at 11. As we know, 11 is us. We are the 11. So we have another sense of completeness with the 11, another closing of a chapter, another period of recognition. As you can see, I put many cards on here. We see one depiction of justice surrounded by the rest of these depictions of strength, the original placement of the strength card, also called lust here. And at the 11, we're asking about the relationship to the self again. And we're looking at the breakdown. When we're dealing with 11, we're also referencing 8 because of the swap. And then when you add 11, 1 + 1 = 2, we're referencing the priestess. And then we're also referencing the magician. You know, 11 is the magician looking at itself, or it's the priestess in combination. And so once again, asking who does the story serve and where we're operating from. And these beautiful classic depictions of the woman holding open the lion's mouth, suggesting total control over our animal nature, total self-actualization. And you can see the relationship here between key 11 and the magician. In this deck, you see that they're wearing the same hat, which also looks like an infinity symbol, right? And we know that the infinity symbol is here and also on the magician in many depictions, which is also the 8. And then 11 is this other kind of infinity, right? If we look at 8 as the infinity symbol, we can also look at 11 as these two parallel lines that go on into theoretical infinity. Yeah, so synthesizing ourself and our will and our strength in this space of of relationship to ourselves and our intentionality and everything that we've accomplished along the way. And then we come to 12. I think 12 is more appropriate this way. The Hanged One. And so this suggests a type of rebirth. And I put in the quote that I just read out here about discovering the rose of our human fiveness wedded to the cross of the deity's sixness. So the great work of recognizing that we're an 11. So if we recognize that we're an 11, what comes next? Like, it's not necessarily just poof, we're enlightened, but perhaps. Perhaps for some, they can skip to 21, but most of us have a lot more integration to do once we realize that we're in a human body and that we're also God. And not the false God, right? Not this sense of like, I'm replacing God, but it's like, no, I'm God, human God. Like, it's in relationship, and I'm humble about it. Or if we're not humble about it, you know, the tower's coming for us. Humility, who needs it, right, Cherry?
Wait, what?
I was just joking because when we recorded a podcast together, I was like, we're gonna blow everyone's minds. And
Oh,
you're
right,
like,
right.
down. Like,
We're the best.
it's true though. So I really love this card. It's always felt like a card of expansion to me. And it may not look that way, and it can scare people for sure, but I've had really deep experiences with this card and invitations to trust and to be patient and to allow things to unfold. I think I've accidentally worked a little magic with this card. The tree position, like when you do that in yoga, and this mimicking this position here with the, I don't know, like we said, life is a living ritual. If we're gonna be, you know, manipulating our bodies in certain ways and chanting certain things, there might be outcomes. So it's always good to.
That was the best thing you've said yet. I feel like that is a great tagline for your future podcast. Sorry, that was so delightful.
There might be outcomes. I started spellcasting before I really knew what I was doing, and sometimes spellcasting works. It's really powerful to work with our words and our intentions and the elements and song and cards, and like, yeah, I really invite everyone to play and also, you know, be really intentional, because sometimes we call in things that we think that we want, or we call them in a way that is like, oops, should have been more clear. But life's for the living, right? And I put the Lovers on here because there's so many different ways to break down 12. Sure, you could do 4 and 8. You could take the Emperor and whatever you're ascribing to 8, and you could look at the Hanged One through that lens. You can also associate it with the Empress, of course. 3, 1 + 2 = 3. Again, like that womb space emanating out, and that's really what the Hangman feels like to me, is like this emanation outward. They used to, like, I think Odin hung himself from a tree for like 9 days to achieve enlightenment. And I believe this is the depiction of Artemis, who also did that. And so it's throughout mythologies, deities have been doing this to achieve enlightenment, hanging upside down. And so, yeah, with having the Lovers, look like, considering the Lovers is also this pairing and this merging, and this choice, like, what if the Lovers was looking at itself in the mirror, and considering the Hanged One through that, this notion of blending and choice, and like, what happens when we're in that tension and that cocoon. So you can break that down with all the cards. You can find different ways to break them apart and analyze them through different lenses. Card 13, often called Death, but not always. This card had no name ascribed to it originally. And I forgot until I was making these slides, because I was just at my brother's place and they don't have a 13th floor on their apartment. Or they do, they just don't call it that. I always think that's so ironic with just so much superstition. So many buildings don't have certain floors, but I'm like, it's still a 13th floor. It's just, you're just calling it 14. But anyways. So 13 also is, I believe it was an important number to the pagans. I know that Friday the 13th used to be a day that wasn't suspicious or about bad luck. It was, I believe, associated with divine feminine energy, which is really interesting to consider when we look at this depiction of death. I love this depiction where the Pope's begging for his life and the king is dead here. And then off in the distance, we see the sun rising between these two gray towers, and gray again representing non-duality. And so that feels like really hopeful, especially if we're thinking about 13 being associated with the divine feminine, and recognizing that the tarot emerged out of a patriarchal oppressive structure where it had to code and embed symbols in to get them out there, like the female Pope we saw in card 2, that this is really a card of transformation and rebirth. Death is rebirth. That is the cycle of life, beginnings and endings. And so anytime something leaves, the energy doesn't die, it transforms into something else. And I included lyrics from this Snotty Nose Rez Kid song. They're these indigenous rappers, and it's a great song, and just talking about like leaving behind the colonial project, like killing the passing of the hierarchy, which is something I'm certainly praying for every day, is the shift in the paradigm and leaving behind maybe traditional notions of death. Maybe it's a reclamation of death. We're terrified of death in our culture. We're so fear driven, and all of those fears lead back to a fear of death. I think absolutely, it's just, we're always just trying to stay alive and comfortable, and we rarely, many continue to operate without the awareness that they're just trying not to die and that their ego is just trying to keep them alive and telling them all sorts of stories. So we can all use this card as an invitation to compost, to be rebirthed. And then we come to the end of another cycle. So this being the second layer, 14, the second layer of the 3 layers. And this very clear synthesis of energies, this merging of energies, this blending. And we see the very repetitive motif of these cups being poured. And we see alchemy happening here. In the Lady Frida Harris depiction on the Thoth deck, this says, Visita interior terre reficticando inviernes occultum lapidum, I think. And it's visit inside and you shall write the inner stone. I'm butchering that, but that's the general interpretation. It's about the philosopher's stone existing inside, and that's part of the alchemical mythology, right? Often we hear of alchemy and we think of turning lead into gold, and the philosopher's stone, like the stone of immortality. And so whether or not alchemists throughout the ages were actually creating these things and achieving them, we do take this as a metaphor for this internal marriage, what's called the Hermetic marriage. And you see this character is very androgynous. So is this angel. It's purposely androgynous to speak to the merging of polarities, and to speak to that inner balance. I thought this was an interesting piece, though. The danger of temperance is that we believe we've gone all the way to divine consciousness, that we have in fact become God, not part of God, but a sort of replacement. And so I think this danger is everywhere, not just in temperance, but I guess it's the level of consciousness that temperance represents that allows us to have this sort of like heady feeling. When, you know, things are really aligned and integrated, we're like, oh, great, I figured it all out. Perfect, I'm done. And usually that's when the devil and the tower come along, and we're about to see those next. But I added here vessels, containers, boxes, because I thought it was an interesting concept to sit with in terms of temperance, and the fact that like we've achieved this equilibrium, but we're still working with the containers. We're still working with the elements. We're still moving things back and forth. Like in this depiction, like that mythological world, maybe that story of death was just on the other side, right? Like it's this similar sort of off in the distance. There's something coming. And often when we receive temperance, we think, and temperance also means balance, and it's called art here. And yeah, I'd love to, I forget why Crowley said he called it art. I don't know if you remember, Sherry, if you have insights on why this card is called art.
No, and it's super annoying. Sorry.
No, you're good. We could look it up, but we're getting low on time, so I'm gonna just keep moving forward. I think about it as like the synthesis of like transmuting our internal experience into something in the external world. And so maybe the juiciness in this card is yeah, how we move the energy through and what we create with it, versus like the final world 21 is self-actualization. We're not like transmuting anymore. We're just like enlightened. Right. So remember, the danger of temperance is thinking that we know it all or that we're finished. I think there's a lot of righteousness that can come with breakthroughs and epiphanies. Often we'll break through to a deeper layer of understanding, but we won't go deep enough back yet to like have the humility, you know, especially, at least for me, a lot of my breakthroughs come through relationship, you know, when someone so-called wrongs me, and then I have to deal with my ego in that situation. If I break back, I'm like, oh yeah, well, I figured this out, and then come from this place of like, well, you were wrong, you know. I'm like, no. Take another step back and have a little humility. If that person was quote unquote wrong, they couldn't see it. You know, we're all just out there operating, doing what we think is best. And we're often like just clicking back piece by piece and going like, yes, I know everything, instead of taking a beat and going another click back and going like, oh, right, that was okay. And so I brought in those pieces of what's in your toolbox, right? Because when we have 15, we have 1, which is the magician. And I brought in the power of choice, because where we have 15, we also have 6. And then the Hierophant, obviously the 5, something remembered by the body. So the devil has this depiction of the upside down pentagram, as we remember with the Hierophant over here, the 5 being the human. When it's depicted upside down, that represents the devil, matter over mind. But hang on, I'm getting distracted here by this. So this is a Baphomet image on the Marseille deck here. And it is this blending that we were talking about in Temperance, this hermetic marriage, and we're seeing that expressed here on this Baphomet image, which is the hermaphrodite type depiction. And it's sometimes described as this grotesque merging, but I think that's a biased depiction. I think Baphomet was actually, I believe, worshipped in some cultures. I'll have to research it more, but it's another depiction of the devil, another way of understanding this synthesis of polarities, because when we're talking about the tarot, we are talking about this relationship between polarities, and therefore gender, or what we call gender, what we understand to be gender, as it has been introduced through these patriarchal constructs. And we see these humans humans here, but with tails, and then miniature devils, and then just sperm in the Crowley deck. We see them tethered to this black box. And then we see in the depiction of the devil here that he has Saturn. This is a symbol for Saturn on his hand. And Saturn, one of the symbols of Saturn is a black box. And that's because Saturn represents the boundaries of time and space. Because before humans invented the telescope, Saturn was the furthest planet we could see. That's why the 7 ancient planets end with Saturn. And so it represents being tethered to these boundaries of time and space, these limitations. And you see the devil lighting the atom figure on fire there, and thinking about where the impulses come from, and thinking about our nature, right? Again, the tarot being this relationship between our animal and our Ubermensch, and what we're being driven from, and what we're tethered to, or what we are beholden to. And this is another interesting depiction here. This is the 4 names for God, but upside down and backwards. And this is the symbol of Mercury. And in other depictions of the Baphomet and the Marseille deck, you can also see a face on the belly. It's not in this one, but in other depictions, you'll see it. So one way to look at it would be as communicating or thinking from this lower place, thinking from these lower energy centers. In the Mother Peace deck, you see this emperor and this clock, right? And these chains and this hierarchy being chained to time, and the ruler, the emperor there.
You know, something I think I never see referenced is that you have the man and the woman standing before an imposing figure, and to me it's just like the Lover's card, but it has its own, it's the devil instead. And I think in the Thoth card of the Lovers, the person, the old man, is supposed to be, I want to say, the Hermit. I'm not sure. Would make more sense if it was the Hierophant, but yeah, both of these cards show, kind of the same thing, but no one ever makes the connection, at least that I've seen. I don't know.
Yeah, it's a much deeper layer when you start looking at like 15 next to 6. I didn't find that in my studies until I went to the Philosophical Research Society. I took a class from Yolanda Robinson, the author of this book, which I know you have, Sherry. And I did that in 2022. No, I don't. Didn't you get this one?
No.
Oh, I thought, yeah.
Sorry. I failed.
Sorry. I thought you told me you got it. No, you didn't fail. Failed. But yeah, she taught a class. It was 2022. She taught a class on the 6 year, and she's like, yeah, the 6 is also the devil because it's the 15. And I was like, what? But then when you look at them side by side, it's very clear, right? Like when we see, this depiction of the Lovers next to the devil, it's obvious that the iconography, like that the imagery is related. And then we look at this Thoth depiction next to the devil, and like when you see it, what is this? This is a phallus, testes and a phallus, and this is a yoni. So he's put in these depictions as this male energy and this female energy, or just these visual cues that you may not notice until you put them side by side.
And it's still in the Thoth version, it's still the coming together. It's not perfect, but it's the coming together of the matter within the 2 spheres to create something, which is there's the Orphic egg in the Lover's card, which reappears later in the art card. What book did you hold up? Maybe I spoke too soon. Was that the
Revised New Art Tarot?
Okay, no, yeah, I do have that book. Sorry. I just have it on Kindle, so I didn't recognize it.
Oh, nice. I'm so glad you can get it on Kindle. That's awesome.
I'm an idiot. Okay.
No, you're not. Stop. You're perfect. Yeah, it's really interesting when you start, like, I haven't done it for all these, but when you start breaking down the cards and pairing them, and something that's really important to remember about the devil can also be seen as the light bearer, a torch bearer. And we see this light here, and I'm not entirely clear on the lineage but Lucifer is associated with Venus and the morning star. And anyways, there's so much wrapped up in these stories that we just don't get in the sort of overarching notions of the devil. There's so much more to be investigated there. So I really encourage anyone who's curious about that to dig in further. So Rachel Pollack says, if we see the devil as simply illusions, then the tower shows them shattered by violent upheaval. However, if the devil signifies release of repressed energy, then the illusion shattered by the lightning is nothing less than the veil of consciousness itself. So the tower I've been trying to figure out, by the way, I don't know if you notice, I have a depiction of the tower right behind me. This is a tower because this card has haunted me a little bit. And when I discovered this Marseille version, it totally changed my perception of it, because this was the deck that I was working with, and it's a little intense. And then, these depictions are also quite intense. It's upsetting. It's upsetting. So when I found this depiction, I was like, excuse me? It's possible to have this like sweet, gentle tower, and like there's no lightning. It's a feather. It's a feather knocking the crown off. It's so gentle. These people don't look like they're falling. They look like they're just like flying, or like gravity doesn't apply to them, But then we look a little bit closer. We actually see in this depiction too that this person's quite upset, but this guy's just kind of like, well, yeah, I'm falling again. And you'll notice that the crown remains on his head, whereas this one has no crown. And you see the crown coming up top. So I do think it's pertinent to recognize that like the crown is being knocked off, but the person who maintained their crown as they're falling is just like a little disgruntled. They're not super upset. Like, you think if you were that close to hitting the ground, you'd be like freaked out, but they're like, nah, it's cool. Like, it's gonna be okay because I know that I'm God. I'm a human, but I'm also God, and I'm just doing this little dance. And sometimes I forget that I'm God. Sometimes I get too excited about being a human and too driven by my human urges, and I need to God comes and goes, knocks you down. One of the myths about the tower is the Tower of Babel, and they say that's the mythology of how we got all these different languages, that everybody used to live together in harmony, and they were building this tower to God. And God was like, what are you doing? You can't build a tower to God. Like, that's not how it works. And he knocked it down. And then that was the crumbling and the spreading of and how everyone became different and could no longer have conversations with each other because of the hubris of trying to build a tower to God, trying to erect. We can definitely see parallels of that in our world, like these concepts of erecting these towers. And I like this depiction of the Voyager deck here. Like this dark, ominous black building kind of reminds me of a TV remote. And looking at it just feels kind of like this sort of like this very, like there's red in there. It's like this war energy. There's a lot of fire, even though there's not actually fire, it's just leaves, but it looks like fire. And this sort of, there's someone down there releasing, surrendering, free diving amongst this sort of this chaos and this like modern structure with a sun behind it. So as we learned with the devil, it's also associated with key 6, the lovers. The tower is also associated with the Chariot 7. And as we remember, the Chariot is about having a layer of actualization and a layer of realization in relationship to ourself and to our God self, but not being in control and allowing not being in control, but sometimes still developing a relationship to control and our relationship to choice, I guess. And then the tower being this other side of this actualization and this momentum getting knocked away. And you know, as I said, I've been working with the tower and trying to figure out, is it inevitable? Could the tower be avoided? I would like to avoid the tower, please. Can I not continue to work with this energy? And I think what the Marseille depiction offers us is that, well, we may not be able to stop working with tower energy. We can choose how we react to it. We can be in witness to it. It can be feathers, not lightning, and colorful balls or manna from heaven instead of these. And these are just yods. Like, we haven't gone into that, but these are these little impulses of consciousness, of fire, of light coming through. And that we can have different relationships to the tower, and we can allow layers of ourselves to be burnt away. The pieces that we build on our ego identity, these ideas of who we are, we can let them shift, we can let them fall without being attached to the outcome. And the more that we are able to develop fluidity, the easier it'll be when those shifts happen, and the less reactive we will get. And perhaps one day we will actualize to the point where we don't bring in the shifts. But again, I'm not enlightened. I doubt I'm going to be enlightened in this lifetime, but we'll see. Next is 17, the star. And the star, again, has these vessels, this pouring. And so I brought in the Temperance again to remind us of where we've seen these before and the danger that was warned here. And something that has come up for me with the star is spiritual bypassing. And I wanted to bring in this piece of white feminism. And white feminism is just a descriptor. Anybody can be a white feminist. It's most likely to be a white woman, but it's possible for anyone to embody that energy. And when I say white feminism, I mean the right to comfort overtaking our commitment to humanity. And I bring this up because there's a lot of love and light out there. There's a lot of people who believe that their high vibes are a priority, when really what we're here to do is to let energy move through. And this is what the tarot shows us when we look at the tree of life. And the minor arcana is the journey of energy. And so to be high vibes only would be to only be this side of the star, right? You see that this star is half on water and half on land, and she's got a foot like Jesus styles on top of the water, right? So she's both a human, and see, she's pouring down this water that goes into 5 streams representing the human, but also has this hand floating, the foot floating on the water. So representing both the human and the deity. And I love this Zen koan. Before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. After enlightenment, chop wood, carry water. So it's the reminding, like the constant coming back to, like, in our spiritual hubris, you know, after a tower moment, the star is often noted as a card of healing. And in healing ourselves, I think there's a real invitation to remain humble, to more knowing, to remain humble to more pain, to remain humble to more unraveling and more teaching, and not getting, again, caught up in that temperance type, or that level of consciousness where we've realized that we are God, but not realized enough to know that we're God in a human body and having a human experience on some level with godlike powers. Of course, we should definitely tap into our godlike powers, but for the collective, for humanity, to truly be in service, I think requires a level of humility. And a reminder that, yeah, 17 and 8 are related, and so you can look at the star, both with justice and strength, as different ways to interpret it. So Next is the moon, and the following one is the sun, and they form a nice little trio as well. And as I was saying with the star, we're supposed to move things through us. Energy is meant to be in motion. And the moon is a card of movement, of energy in motion. And we see the little crayfish here, right, on several of the cards. And the crayfish actually is also an emblem of Cancer, the crab. And as we know, the Cancer was the gate, which they say the gate that consciousness came through. And so we see it emerging out of the water, right? This crayfish, crab, lobster type creature emerging out of the water, like emerging out of the divine life, coming from that fluid source space, and then traveling through this path again with the towers, these towers motif. We see these towers that was promised on the death card. We're getting closer. And then we see a wolf and a dog. And so the dog we remember from the Fool card, and being this loyalty, this taming of the animal. And then the wolf representing the wildness of the animal, and both of those things existing. And this is really cool. On the Thoth card, there's a little dung beetle there. And the dung beetle is important because the seeds get planted in the dung, like in the shit. That's where the new growth comes from, is like that compost piece. And so this moon card is this way of like fertilizing, like using the compost and transmuting it. And we see the Anubis here, which is the guardian of the underworld, and going through this pathway, or going through this channel of transmutation of everything that we've carried with us so far, what we've the actualization that we've created, the balance we've created in ourselves, meeting our shadow, burning away more, healing, but retaining humility, and then coming to this place of synthesis where we're exercising something's coming through. A lot of people will call this like a card of illusions or like delusions. And I think because there is a great risk of, when we're healing, if we're not accessing all of our pain, if we're not grieving, if we're not moving it through us, our ego can start telling us little chattery stories to like hide some of that pain away. It's like, no, don't want to feel it. What if you believe this? And so the moon can represent that, but that's the shadow of it. What it's really about is the opportunity to continue transmuting and continue the process. I put we only exist in relationship because I think that's just, everything is in relationship to our, if it's me with my thoughts, me with the person I'm with, like none of these things exist in silos or in isolation. And so it's always just this dynamic process of coming back to ourselves, or checking in with ourselves, or checking in with others, and just remembering the dynamics at play, that nothing is set, that everything is fluid. Yeah, then the sun is actually like maybe the simplest card in the Major Arcana. I feel like, something like the Chariot or the moon, we could just dissect for hours. But the sun is like just kind of clear and straightforward. It being the source of life, but and the purity that comes with that. Like we see all these depictions of just like young children, innocent, and completely pure and joyful. And so it's that beautiful energy of like, once we've done the transmutation work, this clarity and this naivete and this return, and then breaking it down into the Magician and the Hermit. And we remember from the Hermit what was in the Hermit's lantern. Now, some depictions of the Hermit, it's clearly a star, but in this Thoth one, I'm pretty sure that's a sun. And so I think that's a really interesting correlation to make when we look at the sun, because again, we know that the 1 and the 9 are present. So the Magician and the Hermit are present, that we tie it back into the Hermit and this wisdom, carrying that with us, One book I read talked about the hermit being reborn as the young child, and perhaps, but I love this idea of like this non-linear relationship to them, where the hermit is the archetype where we're carrying the sun with us. We're always holding this beautiful childlike wonder, this beautiful piece of perfection, of just being a child of the sun and that being enough, that we're always carrying that with us, and it being a guiding light, and it being something that we share with the world sometimes, and other times we cloak it for ourselves. And our wisdom comes in the decisions we make and our inner knowing once we've gone through all of these stages. And then the second last card in the majors, this one is called Judgment. Although it does have other names, Aleister Crowley called it the Aeon. In the Voyager deck, it's called Time Space, which I think is perfect, just perfect, that these boundaries, this category place that we live in, this time space continuum that we live in, this structure that we live in, is represented in this card. We see these depictions of this judgment day, of these people rising out of coffins to be reborn. And this cool depiction on the Mother Peace deck of this Ankh, and the Ankh is a symbol of immortality. It's also represents like the cross being, the 5 being the human, the cross being the human, but the Ankh being this like looping of energy. And so it's like, it's like, if the cross, Jesus on the cross is this very finite life, the Ankh is this immortal life within the human body, instead of this promise of immortality afterwards. I've really come to understand judgment as the key to knowing when my ego is at play. I know that if I'm judging something, it comes from a place of ego. Probably always, can't confirm, but chances are high that that's how our ego maintains control, because our souls are fluid. Our souls don't, maybe they have identities, again, can't confirm that, but the ego has an identity, and the ego wants to maintain its identity at all costs. And when its identity is challenged, it meets it with judgment. Judgment says, I am not that. I am not that. I could never be that. But we know that I am you and you are me, and we're all mirrors, and that the goal here is this internalized polarity where we know that nothing is separate, and that every reaction is, every judgment is an invitation to dissolve a frame, to release something. I don't know that we can ever completely dissolve judgment, or that we would want to. I don't know that we would be in bodies at that point. I think that if we and perhaps I'm completely incorrect, but this is where from where I'm standing right now, it feels like we need these frames, that we need these boundaries, and we need these corners to be in this paradigm. And that's what storytelling is. That is the stories we tell each other. It's all rooted in perception and language and separation. And so, yeah, the last step before this actualization, before this world, is this piece of release, of letting go, of inviting in the new. We see on, and Aleister Crowley called this the Aeon, and he's got the child of the Horus there, this child of Isis and Osiris, and it's supposed to represent this new Aeon, this new paradigm, maybe the Aquarian age. Something beyond what we currently understand, something beyond this judgment paradigm. We're very much in this separation paradigm of original sin, where we have to achieve goodness outside of ourselves, which then leads to judgment. So maybe we can be in bodies and just be chill and still tell stories, but not judge each other, and just like live in harmony. It'd be really nice. I think we're all here for it. I know we're all here for it. And so this is the last card And as you can see, it's the only card not rooted on the ground. It's abstract. It's in the sky. We see the 4 fixed signs of the zodiac again. We see this woman called the dancer often. She's called the dancer, the world dancer. And she's got not 1, but 2 magical wands. The magician was holding 1 at the beginning, and she's got 2 now. And yeah, she's figured it out. And I put a poem I wrote with this, and I'll read it to you now. Can you hold it? The weight of the world without breaking. Love for self, love for other. Can you hold it? The posture, the pain, the knowledge that knowing will not keep you sane. Can you hold it? And I wrote that at a time when I was searching a lot of answers, and I feel satisfied in this moment with where I've landed, with the answer really being the unknown and being comfort with the unknown, living in the uncertainty, and allowing a deeper and deeper relationship to myself through understanding my nature and my desires, and sometimes following them and sometimes not, being in relationship to them. But knowing that seeking answers isn't the answer. It can be a joy and a wonderful curiosity of my life. But ultimately, everything I'm looking for, everything that I truly need exists inside of me. Even though I have all sorts of needs, community and food and so on, ultimately, I could just live on my breath, theoretically. I could theoretically just meditate in a forest. I could achieve this world dancer state of enlightenment. People have on this planet. But ultimately I'm in choice. I get to be in relationship to the cards. I get to be in relationship to myself. I get to choose what's in integrity for me. I get to choose how I want to be, how I want to show up in this human body. Because I am a human, I'm also God. So I have these choices, I have this awareness, but I have enough awareness to know that I'm not God, that there are limitations and there are always deeper layers to uncover. But whether or not I'm gunning for this, whether or not I'm attempting this, I keep this in my mind as a possibility, as an invitation, as a place to return to. Because even though it's the world, even though she's not on the ground, she's floating in the sky, she's still surrounded by these archetypes. She's still surrounded by this grand fixed cross that keeps her in this story as long as we're in the body, as long as we're playing with cards and asking questions. We're going to be in some kind of fixed paradigm, and that's okay. Because we know that there's more out there, or more to come, more in the next life, or we had enough in the previous lives, and we just get to be here now, using the tools we have, filling our toolbox further, deepening our relationship to ourselves, and making life a living ritual all the time, bringing in more and more ritual, even if that ritual just becomes an inner knowing and a relationship to the world around us, where we see it with reverence and awe, and our ritual becomes being open and curious like the Fool, whatever may come our way.